All right, good morning and welcome to PACT's Talent Connect series. I'm Dean Miller, the president and CEO of PACT, and we have an interesting discussion. And this is by no means a panel discussion that's going to provide solutions that are one size fits all, but we're going to get into an interesting discussion this morning about maintaining an inclusive culture in this remote and hybrid world. As you know, PACT sits in the center of tech companies, investors, professional advisors, universities, et cetera, and everybody is talking about talent. And talent is one of our key areas of focus. And we're certainly grateful to bring you this conversation this morning. We couldn't do so without great support. And I want to recognize a couple of companies that really have dedicated themselves not just to this community and supporting PACT and high growth entrepreneurship, but also to the talent equation. And those are Baker Tilly, SEI, Oars Partners, and Vanguard. As you know, we are in a webinar, so you are on mute, but you can still ask questions. So please use the comment box. We'll monitor that throughout. The panel will go for about 45 minutes, and then you'll be directed to subject-specific roundtables. I should say you can choose which subject-specific roundtables you go to. Those will be explained a little bit later in the program. Opportunity, obviously, to have some more fine discussion moderated by one of our panelists. And with that, I'd like to turn the program over to Jess Podgajny. Jess is the CEO and co-founder of LLUNA, and she's going to help kick us off and introduce our other panelists. Welcome, Jess.
Thank you so much, Dean. A pleasure to be here, and I'm seeing some familiar names trickle in to listen today. So really excited for the audience. One thing I want to say before we jump in is that we want this to be interactive. So please do not hold back on your chat questions or any other comments that you want to share. You can raise your hand and we'll try to bring you on to ask questions as well. We really want this to be an engaging dialogue for everyone. And we certainly have an impressive panel lined up today to talk about the really multifaceted perspectives when it comes to building and maintaining inclusive cultures in hybrid environments. As Dean mentioned, I'm Jess Podgajny. I am the CEO and co-founder of LLUNA. LLUNA's technology platform is really a team operating system for hybrid and remote employers. And what we do is combine personal operating profiles, think of these as user manuals for people, with team dashboards to help teams operate and really optimize the way that they're working to be more productive, engaged, and to really drive belonging in our remote setting. So I am excited and honored to be your moderator today. And with that, I would love to introduce our illustrative panel. Cath, I'll pass it over to you first to get us started.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jess. And I'm really excited to be here. I am coming to you from a hotel room in Rhode Island. So hopefully, I think I made my bed behind me. I am a managing director at Accenture. I've been here for about 16 years, and I'm so excited today to talk about this topic because I've seen Accenture really evolve in this area. So for those who don't know much about Accenture, we're a client services company. When I joined 16 years ago, I won't get the numbers exactly right, but we're about 200,000 people globally. And right now we're about 721,000 people globally. So we didn't do that just by hiring people and putting them behind desks. We're building a we're still building a culture of trying to get people to want to be here and really building that inclusive environment. So we still have a lot to learn. We still have a lot to do. So I'm excited to learn from a lot of you today as well. So thank you, Jess, so much for having us.
Of course. All right, Leslie, over to you.
Thanks so much, and delighted to have the opportunity to be a part of this discussion today. I'm Leslie Hafter. I'm the SVP of Operations at Oars Partners. Oars Partners is a talent acquisition consulting firm. So this is a very interesting topic for me because it's relevant not only to my own company and how we are incorporating on-site and remote employees, but these are conversations that we are having with our clients on an ongoing basis. Quick additional information about me. I rejoined Terry Williams, our CEO, at at the beginning of 2020, 6 weeks before we sent everybody home because of the pandemic. So it was a very interesting time to be stepping into an operations leadership role. We had about 70 resources when I joined and cut back at the beginning of the pandemic, and then a quarter later started on a really unparalleled growth path and tripled in size over the next couple of years. And that was a new model for us because for the first time, we were hiring as many remote employees as we were hiring on-site employees. So it really required an adjustment in outlook for us, and we were very deliberate about it. So it is a subject that I am personally invested in and looking forward to talking about it with everybody.
Thank you so much, Leslie. And our third and final panelist today, we've got Vish coming to us from the West Coast. So thank you for dialing in so early. If you don't mind giving a quick intro.
Sure. You can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. So I'm Vish. I'm CEO and co-founder of SoWork, and yes, it is 5:38 in the morning here. So this is just great. But yeah, we're building SoWork. So I like to say that we're building the right version of what Zuckerberg is trying to do. So we're building a workplace metaverse where distributed teams can get back sort of all the things that they feel and employers feel they're missing from in-person: spontaneity, creativity, culture building activities, togetherness, bonding with your team, rapid productivity, while also keeping the flexibility that they deserve and they love, right? Remember, something like 95% of employees want more flexible work. And so we're building the solution that helps teams to get what they want, which is a better way to work together than Zoom and Slack, while helping employees maintain the flexibility that they also deserve. So happy to talk about how that came about, because it was born out of the pandemic and problems that I think we all felt later on in the talk.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for your introductions. I think at this point we can kick off with our first question. This is really directed to both the panelists and the attendees. So for everyone in attendance, if you wouldn't mind, maybe drop a comment or question in the chat about what are your burning questions, or what are your kind of priorities as you're thinking about building inclusive cultures in hybrid and remote work settings. And that way we'll get some of this interaction going. While I pass it over to the panelists, I'll go, Cath, to you first, and really just tee up a foundational question for us today. What does inclusive culture mean, and why does it matter?
Thanks, Jess. And when I think about inclusive culture, to me, it's all about how do we celebrate people's, like, all of our differences, and how do we celebrate people being their authentic selves, and how do we provide that opportunity for people to bring their authentic selves to work, and either to work or to, like, anywhere, into their personal lives as well. How do we help people really truly be their authentic selves? And I really like the word celebrate, because it's not just allowing people to come here and work. It's not about enabling them and providing them an environment. It's celebrating it as well. And by celebrating, it makes it just something a little bit more special. And it really helps all of our team members, even here at Accenture, think differently about the questions that they ask, and, taking a pause and really learning about everyone that they're working with, that it stops being transactional. And it just stops being just, on Zoom or on Teams and just go. It's about celebrating who people are, how they got to where they are, and the why behind it. And I think that, why this matters, the whole celebrating and why building this inclusive culture matters is, not only does it help us attract our talent and retain our talent and build amazing collaborative teams, like, that is awesome, and I'm all in for that. But I'm the type of person who really looks at it from, like, an individual. And, I just love seeing individuals flourish. And I love seeing individuals really be able to then like unleash themselves and be able to be the most innovative and creative selves that they all are. And I know I keep saying bringing their most authentic self to work, but I think when people are able to do that, it just unleashes so much for themselves, for us here at Accenture, for our internal company, as well as then for our clients, that if they're not showing up the way that they want to show up and that they feel their best, then our clients don't get their best. And that if the clients don't get their best, then we're not doing our job. So I think it means really celebrating each other and celebrating what makes each of us different, and and understanding that, and just building that culture.
I love that. The idea of getting really personalized about how you're engaging each person, helping people to really shine their lights brighter. Leslie, I'll pass it to you. What does inclusive culture mean to you, and why do you think it matters?
Well, I will riff off of a lot of what Cath said. I had the good fortune to be a part of the creation of DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs at my current company and my former company, which was radically different than this one. I was working for a large corporation in Philadelphia that had hundreds of thousands of employees. And we talked a lot about the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and yes, the importance of everybody being their authentic selves and feeling comfortable bringing their authentic selves to the table. And I'm assuming, perhaps incorrectly, that most of the folks on the webinar today are familiar with the Harvard Business Review study that shows that being inclusive and diverse actually is better for business financially. And there are a lot of CEOs out there who are like, yeah, DE&I, whatever. If you want to do that, have fun with it. But if you can talk with them about the literal value and adds to the bottom line, all of a sudden they start paying much closer attention. And so I think that's a very important conversation to have. In the context of today's conversation, I think that the virtual on-site model presents additional challenges, but also additional opportunities for inclusion. Because when you have a group of people who are together in one place, and then other people who are joining the conversation through electronic means, whatever that might be, it gets very easy to unlevel the playing field. And so we need to be much more cognizant and proactive in our inclusion efforts in this combined workspace.
Thank you, Leslie. Really appreciate that. The intentionality of the way we're working now, so critical to being inclusive. So Vish, I'm going to pass it over to you. How would you define inclusive culture, and why do you think that it matters?
Sure. So I'll kind of approach it from a slightly different angle then. So my perspective is that an inclusive culture is one that helps everybody to use their abilities to the maximum, right? Because that's kind of what that's kind of what helps humans feel like their hard-earned expertise and their brains are actually being used, and they feel good, right? It's like we feel good doing good work, and we feel good being challenged, and that can only happen. That can only happen if you are actually using your abilities. Once you start to get bored or feel like you're not necessary or not needed or whatever, then you start to feel bad real fast. And so, for people to feel that way, feel like they can use their abilities to the maximum, then they need to be in a psychologically safe environment. Otherwise, it's really not gonna happen. So creating that, when you ask, what does an inclusive culture mean? Well, from my perspective, you have to start creating that psychologically safe environment from the top. But it has to be so built in and ingrained into your culture that like that quote, culture is what happens when the leadership isn't around, right? And so it needs to happen automatically by all teammates. So once you have a psychologically safe environment, people can then be themselves and contribute. They can sort of flex their brains, which again is what keeps people around ultimately, and feeling needed because they are needed. And so if you have an inclusive culture, you get to tap into everyone's unique perspectives. And ultimately that's better for people and better for the business, as it was kind of alluded to before I started speaking. So the question is, how do you build an inclusive culture? And I think we'll talk about that a little more throughout the panel.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So I think to summarize the key points for that each of you made, it's about being authentic, it's about being intentional, and it's about amplifying the strengths you have on the team, really. And I'll bring it back to Cath's word earlier, celebrating the people that you have and the strengths that that they bring to the table. So Cath, I'm going to kick this back to you and ask maybe ask a question maybe several people are currently thinking. How can we be consistently inclusive and have a consistently inclusive culture when everybody seems to want something different?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jess. And I was thinking about it in 3 different ways. And one, I think it's always about being empathetic. It's always about thinking about putting yourselves in our team member shoes, in our leaders' shoes, and just trying to understand maybe why they did something, why they're thinking about it, and not projecting and saying, this is why I think they did it, but asking the questions and really being empathetic and understanding where people are and why they're there. We're all so different. So we can't put the generalities on each other, right? That we have to, you said the word, and I love this word, intent. I put on so many of my post-its, right? Intentionality, that we have to be intentional. We have to be empathetic. That's the only way we build this inclusive environment. I think the second thing is we have to initiate the conversation. We can't be scared. We can't be scared that we're going to say the wrong thing. We can't be scared that we're going to be judged on it. That in order to have this true inclusive environment, us as leaders need to be the ones asking the questions. We need to be the ones not just telling people what they should be doing, but instead asking the questions to get a better understanding. We don't know everything. And I just think that is such a way for us to set an example for all of our team members, as we're bringing them, through our firm or through our clients, is ask questions and initiate the conversation, so that people know that you were all on my little post-it, is about being intentional. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not just because Jess, we talked about this a couple of days ago. It's not just because a policy changed and it's like, let's go, policy changed, and now behaviors change. Now we have to really think about how we're going to be intentional and personal to people, to make sure that we can help build that inclusive environment. Policies don't build the inclusive environments. Us as leaders do, and we have to be intentional in every decision we make and every conversation we have, and really slow down and make sure we're asking the questions. And I just keep saying asking the questions, but we just have to keep learning from each other. So that's kind of when I think about how we have to be consistently inclusive. It's just like, be empathetic, be intentional, and just initiate the conversation. Don't be scared.
Thank you, Cath. Leslie or Vish, you have anything you want to add to this question, to this line of thinking?
I can chime in, sure. Although, again, I think variations on a theme. Communication is critical. And we heard in everybody's openings, but Jess, I think you and Vish in particular have companies where trying to facilitate that communication is core to your business models. We are utilizing every tool and every means at our disposal, and things that are as basic as Slack and Zoom. But also creating guidelines about the use of the tools that we do have at our disposal, to ensure that everybody is using them appropriately, but also maximizing their potential, and ensuring that what we are doing for people who are local is reflected, if not duplicated, because you can't always do the same things for our virtual teams. And then when communicating, being receptive, learning to listen, because having somebody bring an idea or a concern to the table is all very well and good, but listening and hearing are not necessarily the same thing. So you can't only listen to what people have to say, you have to hear what their intent is. And that's not always an easy thing to do. It's also not always an easy thing for an individual to communicate, particularly if it is a sensitive area for them. So being able to engage them in conversation and help them draw out what is at heart for them makes for a more inclusive environment.
So that makes a ton of sense to me, and I'll just add on that, like, the funny thing is that as I get older, I'm 35 now, so my back hurts and my knees hurt. But as I get older, my everything that I realize that, like, most things that grandmas say is totally right, and so I think that applies here too. So there's like a common set. Like, the question, just to remind the audience, is about how do we be consistently inclusive when everybody wants different things. But I think there's like a common recipe of things that humans need. And it's the stuff that all of our grandmas used to say, which is like, people want autonomy, people want empowerment, and people want to feel respected. And so, and maybe they didn't use those exact words, but that's kind of the gist of what they were all saying. And this is actually pretty well known and pretty well studied in workplace research and all, other fields as well. But once you sort of create that basic recipe in your workplace, then people's unique needs can sort of happen on top of that. But that's like the base of, say, the Maslowian hierarchy of needs for employees. So I think that once that's in place, it creates an environment for everybody that they feel much more able to be themselves, even if we all have our various quirks and need something extra on top of that.
Cath, I see you're not muted. Do you have a burning thought you want to share real quick?
I just love what Vish just said. Like, just do what our grandmoms told us. Like, it goes back to just, I feel like that could like now be the tagline for this as it goes forward.
The future of work. Do what our grandmoms told us to do. I love it too. I think it's really interesting because it seems so fundamental, so foundational, even, dare I say the word basic, that like these are like just human things that we can do at work. But we also know that this is really complex, especially for people that are leading teams. So I have a major, my technology is called TeamOS. So like I'm very focused on the team side of things, but I'm curious from the panel, like, how are you supporting leaders right now? What are you doing inside your organizations? How are we equipping managers to be empathetic, to be respectful, to be empowering, to be giving people autonomy, all of these things? Like it can feel like a lot and somewhat overwhelming, I think, when you're sitting in that seat. So I'm curious about the tactics that you've taken, especially now in a more distributed environment.
I can just start with some quick tactical things. So I keep referencing family, but like my dad always kind of talked about the importance of role modeling. And so I think from our perspective, we're 32 people, and so we're not like the most massive corp in the world, but we're also not super tiny. And I think getting your co-founding team around a similar set of messaging around, or even similar set of principles around how do you role model great communication and openness and transparency and empowerment through leadership. I think that's really important. So a few things that because when you do that and you do it consistently, you create an environment where the other managers and leaders on the team, which is all throughout the org and has such a great leverage across every teammate, they sort of start to behave that way as well. So I think as we have all gone remote or hybrid, the behavior of leadership is so much more important. And to me, there's no better way to reinforce than to have the founders or the leadership otherwise demonstrate and walk the walk and talk about walking the walk, because then it puts emphasis on the importance of role modeling throughout the organization. And it sets this kind of expectation from people around the company that leaders are going to do a really good job of displaying the values and the cultural tenets that need to be in place for a healthy workplace environment, because then it's easy for us to be called out, which is desired, if we're not sort of upholding what we're saying is important to uphold. And then I think the other thing is to build this kind of empowerment into the structure of the organization. And so, for example, we're implementing this next quarter's OKRs. And so to ensure that everybody has clear sight lines into why we're all doing what, and everybody has ownership over something, it means that people are kind of focused on all the right things. And then it's not about the what anymore, it's about the how. And I feel like for lots of people, once clarity goes away, then sort of the mind starts to wander, and then all sorts of chaos from a cultural perspective happens. So I think role modeling and a focus on clarity through people's work is helpful.
I think, Vish, when you talk about the role modeling, I think I mean, how can you disagree with that? But when I look at what we've done at Accenture, it's very similar, right? So Jimmy Etheridge is our North America CEO, and he has a podcast where he just talks with Emmanuel Acho talks about inclusion, diversity, and he's so vulnerable in those moments. It's just, it feels weird to say lovely to see, but it's human. And we're just so lucky for us. I'm very blessed and lovely. I love that I work for Accenture. I'm so lucky to have a leader like him that is willing to be vulnerable in a place like that. And we the podcasts are external. So you can go look at them no matter who you work for. And he's being vulnerable, not just as a leader within our firm, but as a leader outside of our firm. And that just trickles down, right? Because it trickles down. If he's gonna be vulnerable, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take a step up. And then I see other leaders doing things like having I&D moments that start every single one of their meetings. And it's a moment that they ask other people on the meeting to say, what have you seen? And some of my favorite ones is where do you think maybe you didn't do what you should have done? Let's learn from each other. So it's not just all promoting oh, our teams are so great. It's tell us an event, and it's more small intimate groups, but that's where we should be having those conversations. And then the last thing, I think that some tactics, and this is going to sound negative, but I swear it's not. This is my Philadelphia coming out of me. It's we have to call each other out, right? If someone, and I see this happening in a really nice way, right? Through our leaders and through our teams. And I have team members calling me out. It's maybe you shouldn't have said it that way. Oh, what did I miss? Okay, thank you. It's just how do we build an environment? An inclusive culture is going to come when we can call each other out and be safe and help each other understand what we said that maybe wasn't inclusive, or what we did wasn't inclusive. And an example of this, and sorry if I'm talking too much, I just get really passionate about this one, is one of our leaders, we're going to have a meeting during Diwali. And we're well, that's the only day. This is the day that it can work. And then instead we thought about, well, let's take a step back. No, it's not the only day that can work. We're all remote. We can figure this out. Hey, what if we did a podcast, right? Now we actually are using technology differently than we ever did before. So, and now we're being super inclusive because now all of us can listen to it when we need to listen to it. So I just feel and why that happened was because someone called somebody out. in a nice way. Like, I'm not being negative. That's just like I said, the Philly in me. But like, we have to be willing to build this inclusive environment where we can call each other out. And I think that's one of the tactics that we have to get more comfortable with.
And if we can do that by scaling a greased light pole and shouting it from a height, I think that that's even better. These are all clearly we're all in agreement and coming from the same place. I do continue to come back to the idea of communication, and being open about it. And one of my leadership philosophies is that mistakes are not there so that you can then come down on people and shame them for making a mistake. Mistakes are learning opportunities, and a mistake that someone makes within an organization can be a learning opportunity for the entire organization, if you convert it into that kind of a learning session, and you can do it and protect anonymity. So you don't have to call out the particular circumstance, the particular people involved, but teaching, as Vish said, being the role model, setting the example, and showing managers that you are not going to come down on them when they do something that ends in not the best result, but instead that you are going to work with them on identifying where things might have gone off track and how you would approach that same situation differently the next time. So show them that is your approach, and then know that they are likely to do the same with their own team members. And I actually, Thea, I saw your question come up, and I think that there is a tie into this. So yes, it certainly is about relationship building, but I think it's also about showing results of the conversations that you're having. So if somebody comes to you with a question, with a concern, with something that has gone wrong, they need to develop trust in you through the actions that you take after you've had that conversation. So again, it isn't just, yes, I've heard you, and I understand what you're saying, but I've heard you, I understand what you're saying, and here's what we are going to do about it, so that the individual can see that, and so that the organization can see that as well.
Can I just follow up as well? I love that, both of you. I think the vulnerability piece is so important. So, and this is like why I have such respect for engineers. I mean, there's lots of reasons, but one of the things that I was musing about with my co-founders yesterday is like, the thing I love about engineers in general is like, they literally they're happy to be put up on display to say like, my thing worked or it didn't work. It's binary, right? There's daily stand-ups, so they literally have to expose, like open the kimono and expose what they're working on, right? They if they don't get their shit done, it's very obvious, right? There's like nowhere to hide for engineers, and yet they wake up every day and like rise to the challenge. And I think that is so honorable and admirable. So I remember, so I went to police camp when I was younger, and I went through my residency. So my other job is I'm an MD. And when I was going through those two things, the thing that was like beaten into me essentially was like vulnerability. Because if you fail, like let's say at police camp, you like completely fail it, like, you're at the back of the pack, and what everybody does, let's say you're on like a 10-kilometer, 10-mile run or whatever, what everybody does, and this has stuck with me since I was 18 years old, is like, let's say I was at the back, the person at the front looks back and yells to everybody that they need to peel back. And what that means is like, because we run in two lines, like everybody just kind of like turns around, right? Like splits off left and right, turns around, comes to behind me at the back and push me up to the front. right? And so when people are falling behind or whatever, you're having this kind of vulnerable moment where you could feel self-conscious, or you could feel like you're not contributing or you're not keeping up or whatever. But if you have a team that looks back and says, peel back, like you feel very supported. And so that was one of the key things I took away from that, about like showing your faults or showing where your gaps are. Because if you build a culture that doesn't only celebrate it, but helps you to actually be better, right? And of course, the corollary is you have to be willing to be better, and you have to be willing to take other people's advice who may know better. So there's obviously a degree of humility that's required, and that's actually good from a cultural perspective as well. Anyway, I just wanted to touch on that vulnerability piece being really, really important, because if we as leaders show that, then I think it sets a great example. And sorry, maybe one last thing I'll say is, like, for my investors, there's a column, like a monthly email, a newsletter that I started called Things I Fucked Up. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on here, but there you go. And I think that like every month, what I do is I document all the things that I messed up. And then I send that out in like a digest type way, bullet pointed, like, here's this thing, here's how I dealt with it, oops, and here's what I learned, right? And so I'm on my third or fourth one now, and I'm supposed to send it out at the end of this month. And the reactions and the feedback I've gotten from the investor community is pretty solid, because they're saying, wow, okay, so we can see that you're aware of these things and this is how you're dealing with them and all that stuff. And I think if it's amazing if you don't show vulnerability, kind of the trick that you tell yourself is like, oh yeah, like people will think I'm invincible, but that's not actually what happens, right? People think there's something wrong with you, or like you're hiding something. But when you, again, open the kimono, you open yourself up to getting so much better. And so helping your team to see that, I think, is really important, because then everybody, again, coming back to the thing I talked about first, everybody gets to use their brain. And that's, I think, what is the most rewarding for people.
I think this is a good segue into the question about organizational values and purpose. What role do they play in building an inclusive culture? How do you try to kind of bring them front and center? What has maybe even changed about your values, your purpose as an organization, or the behaviors you expect associated with them in light of our kind of growing hybrid and remote work environments? And whoever wants to take it first, Leslie, there you go.
You saw me take myself off mute. I have been taking another look at the question that Danielle asked, and I think that there are some tie-ins to that, about how we continue to keep people feeling connected and valued when we are not all together. And as I said earlier, that was a huge change for my organization in particular. One of the things that I talk with people about when I take them through onboarding is the use of Slack. And in our organization, Slack has taken the place of the water cooler conversation. And one of the things that I say to folks is, you want to be on Slack enough so that you know what's going on, but you don't want to be on Slack so much that people start worrying about how you're actually getting your job done. We use Slack for a wide variety, and obviously there are other tools out there. Teams does this. We happen to be a Slack-centric environment. We've got so many channels and they cover virtually every topic. I just joined the sports channel a couple of days ago. I'm not really a sports person, but it's kind of hard not to be a sports person in Philly right now. But you know, I'm a regular contributor to the What's Cooking channel, and we've got a movie buff channel, and those different areas which are completely non-work related are a way to keep up with things that are going on that are outside of work, and to build those connections and to find things out about your colleagues that otherwise you might not know. And so I think that is a very good way to be mindful and intentional about keeping people as a part of the conversation and being able to shift to adjustments required by changing circumstances, whether those changing circumstances are, we used to be on site and now we're entirely remote. We used to be entirely remote and now we're hybrid. The economy is climbing, the economy is receding. Keeping the ability for people to connect with one another and learn about one another so that it isn't all work. Because going back to what Cath said very, very early on in the discussion about bringing your true selves to the table, your true self is not likely to be your work self alone. Your true self is much more about your self outside of work and how that is going to influence the decisions that you make and the way that you conduct yourself. And communication, my recurring theme, is the way to know about that and allow for that.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Yeah, Vish, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm going to play slight devil's advocate, not to the communication piece, because of course we all agree there. But I think, I actually think that Slack and Zoom, they kind of erode culture. And I think that they accomplish the technical job of sending video from one place to another and sending text message from one place to another. But we're much more complicated beings than that. And it's like what you said, Leslie, and I think Cath, you also mentioned earlier, it's like we are, if we want to bring our authentic selves to work, and if we want to ask our employees and other folks in the organization to really represent who they are and sort of, if we want to walk our walk of being inclusive, then I think the technology has to change to be one that's actually built backwards from what are we trying to accomplish, rather than what do we have available. And when the pandemic hit, like my team was building we were on campus at HBS, and we were building a machine learning software for education. And when the pandemic hit, like Harvard kicked us all off campus. And so we had to kind of scatter. We were all around Boston. And, a month went by, and then 2 months went by, and we became like one of those Zoom Slack teams overnight. And just like everybody else, right? And over like a period of months, I was like, yeah, okay, well, this is not going to work for us, because I worked really, really hard to recruit the team. We took in-person very seriously. Like we would, every Tuesday after deployment, back then we deployed once a week. Now we do it every day, which is awesome. But like we would go out to have a dinner around somewhere in Boston as a team, right? Just as like a deployment celebration, or we would play foosball together in the lobby at the iLab, which is the innovation center at HBS. Like we would do all of these things. And so I was like, after a few months went by using Zoom and Slack, I was like, I could feel this disconnection starting to happen between all these people that, and we claim to be so big on culture. It's like, I used to sort of wake up in a cold sweat and be like, what is happening right now with my team? And so I remembered, like I would rack my brain and try to think about when are the times in my life where I felt the most connected to people, despite being across long distances. And there's one memory, and it's going to sound super nerdy, but there's one memory that kept coming back to me, and that was when I used to play World of Warcraft, right? Like when I was way back in the day, like 17 years ago. Like I made so many good connections in that world, even though there was no video and no audio and nothing like that. But there's something about that environment that helped to bond people together. I met the guy who helped me get into medical school in there. I met my founding CTO. I met someone who invested $2.5 million into our company, right? Like I met all of these amazing folks. And so I said, okay, well, what if we built like a WoW light, like a World of Warcraft light, and see what it would be like if we layered in all the business tooling to work in there. And so we built a prototype, and within a couple of weeks, it completely transformed our business, and then that turned into SoWork, right? So from my perspective, and now like thousands of teams around the world use SoWork, and it's to solve these problems about disconnection, right? So obviously, people should look at it when they get a chance. But Danielle, you and Thea raised two things that we feel are very important, and those are two of the exact problems that we aim to solve through relationship building, through technology that's purpose built to enhance those relationships.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. Cath, do you want to jump in there, or you want me to keep going?
I think keep going.
All right. All right. So
I think it's been said.
definitely. Yeah. So we touched some on the role of technology, and a little bit on the role of values and purpose. I think the big question that I have now is like, but how? Like, how do you actually start to create these behaviors? How do you start to put it into action? And maybe Cath, I'll pass it over to you. Like, what are some like specific tactics that can be deployed to help support either leaders or teams or individuals in general to help create this inclusive culture?
Yeah, thanks. And I think this is hard, right? Because I think it comes down to, and Jess, when we were talking this week, a lot of I was like, I'm a grassroots person, right? Like I want, like if I can make a difference in one person's life, I just feel really good about that. And I think that's just how I think about it from some of the tactics I do, right? And I think to build something to create this culture of being more inclusive, I think the first thing we need to do is just like ask the questions. And I know I keep saying that, but it's ask questions and understand where people are and why they're there. And even when I think about, here's like, this may be a silly tactic, and sorry, I'm like stumbling a little bit, is like looking at calendars and understanding, this is like super tactical, what holidays are coming up, what, whether it be Canada Thanksgiving or whether it be Argentina holidays, right? Like understanding it, and then because we have a very global workforce, and then asking the questions, right? Like even just a couple of weeks ago, it was a holiday in Argentina, and I have an Argentinian leader on my team, and I was like, can you tell me about the holiday? Like, why are you guys off? And he laughed. He goes, it's just like your Columbus Day. And I was like, oh, okay, got it. Right. Like, it's just, sometimes we're not as far away as we think we are. So I think it's just like, and we do that often in all the events that we do at Accenture. It's like, we have to look at a global holiday, because just because we may not have celebrated here in the States, way back when, we're such a global world within the United States. We have to look at that. So I'm going super tactical on you, Jess, but like, I just think understanding the calendar and understanding where we may be having people work on days that they usually wouldn't work if they were, when they were, in their own country. We got to really be inclusive in that way. So I'm just going to go with that one, is because I know we're probably run out of time and I'm starting to choke, is like, look at calendars and ask the questions of, and be mindful and give people the space and grace to be able to, celebrate with their family and friends.
Thanks, Cath. We heard earlier in our conversation that modeling the way that modeling vulnerability, modeling curiosity, modeling empathy, all can help to shape this inclusive culture. For maybe more junior, Cath, you're an MD at Accenture, so you've got the chops. You've been there. You've learned through the years. What are some suggestions for helping maybe more junior people, or how do you coach people that perhaps report to you to help them get there in terms of this approach overall?
I think it's all about spending time with our team, right? So like if I looked at my calendar throughout this week, I probably have no less than 10 meetings with like analysts and consultants. And man, they're brilliant, number one, right? So everyone leaving school right now, like they're just so brilliant. they're bold, which I love. And they're bold in like, just, I want to set up time with you and I want to learn, right? And I think we have to do that back with them, right? I wait till they put the time on my calendar. And look, what I've been trying to do more often is get into the office. Because a lot of our analysts, that's where they are amazing. They're like, and they don't know where to go and what to do. So I think it's like starting to meet them where they are and then help them and like ask them those same questions. So they set up time with us. And I think we just have to be.
Thanks, Cath. So Leslie, anything to add there?
Identifying the strengths in the people that are within your organization. And it doesn't have to be leaders. Presumably your leaders have strengths and that's why they're leaders, but knowing what anyone can bring to the table and giving them the opportunity to work on initiatives that allow them to really demonstrate their strengths and to shine is a really great way, not only just to build an inclusive culture, but to explore the varieties of talents that people have. And that leads to inclusivity in and of itself. And I said that I was happy to have started a DE&I organization, and within ORS Partners, that was transformative because people didn't have a place to go to talk about concerns that they had. Again, this is generally concerns outside of the workplace that were impacting their ability to give their whole selves in the workplace. And so if you are a small company and this is not something that you've already done, then do it. If you are a large company and you have a DE&I organization, whatever it is that you might call it, because all of them have different names, be sure that it is not just there to check a box, not just there to provide lip service, but there to really provide a forum for people to be talking about the issues that are important to them, because you can be very sure that if there are issues that are important to your employees, those issues are also important to your business and to your clients. And you only have your perspective on the world. So you're going to be limited in the ways that you can look at things, but the people who are working with and for you will allow you to have a much broader view that will only benefit them and your business.
Can I agree again? You guys are so brilliant that it's so hard to just like not agree with everything that you're saying. So thanks for making this easy. Can I share my screen for like 10 seconds? Is that cool, Jess?
Go for it.
Okay, cool. So as I kind of alluded to earlier, and we're talking about technology and how that can help, like I still think that when we are worlds apart from our employees and our teammates, I think we just have to rely much more on sort of nonverbal cues. And if we can do that, then I think we'll be better off. So I'll just share like, I don't know if you can see this. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, so this is my office. And so in the metaverse, I'm Batman, as you can see, because why not? And so I can kind of see, like, when I look around our office, I can see like these are two of my teammates, and Anna, I guess she's happy to celebrate Halloween with the pumpkin. She's also an artist, so she puts this little art thing here, and she loves cats, so she put this little cat symbol here. and I can see she's dressed up for Halloween. Eric is a gardener, like he's one of our artists, and I can immediately tell how long he's working for and what his time zone is, and a little bit about him. And the thing that's cool about this is like I can just like go up to them, and our videos will automatically connect, and they'll be they're doing some screen sharing and some modeling and stuff like that. And now they're waving at me, so I'll just quickly say, hey guys, I'm just showing you guys off. So I'll leave you alone now. But I'll first, before I leave, I'll just send them some hearts because I can do that. And then I'm going to walk away from them. And then here's another guy. Here's Utku. He's one of our infrastructure engineers, and I can see he's kind of standing alone by himself. And that's not normal for him. I normally see him like with other teammates, like in great conversation and stuff. So it's a bit odd that he's online, but he's I don't know what's happening. So to me, this is a sign, and I'm only just seeing this now. I need to check in with him later today, right? To be like, dude, are you good? Like, what's going on? Because these are the things that you just can't get if you don't use technology that are purpose built to help create a strong, cohesive team. And so I could give you a tour of the rest of the office, but I won't right now, except to say that we eat normally up here in the kitchen. It's Halloween themed right now, but we normally eat together in the kitchen at these tables. There's chairs for all of us. We meet in our meeting room, which is down here. So there's this pulse that can come back around the office that isn't really possible on the technologies that we use today. So when it comes to like, how does technology help with inclusivity? Well, I mean, it's about the right tool choice, right? If you had a carpenter come to your house to fix something and they just tried to use a hammer for everything, you'd be like, dude, what the hell are you doing? And so I think it's just very similar for us in leadership positions at our jobs.
Thanks for sharing, Vish. That's really cool to see it in action, real time. So appreciate that. And I think it speaks a lot to Danielle's earlier question about how do you create connection when you feel like your day is like meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, very transactional. And it looks like in your metaverse environment, you're able to have more spontaneous interactions that could complement perhaps your day-to-day meeting schedule. Really love that. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to ask one quick question. I'm going to do like a rapid fire response here, just to highlight like any specific risks or like challenges that we've unearthed now that we're working in hybrid and remote environments. So Vish spoke to some of it, this transactional nature, but are there some other things that we've unearthed, and maybe quickly speak to what it is and then how you've seen it be mitigated, or what you think needs to happen to try to begin to mitigate it if we haven't made progress there yet. But just quick thoughts, and we'll probably do one more question before we flip over to our final portion of the day.
In my environment, I think that the largest risk that we uncovered is because of a bias that being on site at headquarters is preferable, that people who are not on site at headquarters are not always considered for the same opportunities. There is a bit of an out of sight, out of mind bias. And the way that we work to overcome it is, first of all, me. I'm very vocal to say, no, it's not about where you are, it's about what you're doing. So let's talk about results. Let's not talk about location.
Yeah, Leslie, I was actually talking to one of my clients about this last week over drinks, and it was really interesting. They said to me, we were talking about inclusion in the workplace, and they said when COVID happened, they only had 4 or 5 hubs across the United States. So they were like, wow, we can now hire from anywhere, and we can actually help them become a more diverse workplace because they could hire from anywhere. Now that they're starting to come back to the office, most of their diverse workplace folks the diverse the diverse team members are now in places where they don't actually have a hub. So now they're pushing people to go back, and they're like, oh, whoa, like we gotta hold the phone here a little bit. And it's now just like, how do you work through that? It's like you just said, it's more about results. It's not about location. But then how do you help this workforce also become, like, the people who aren't in the hubs actually feel more included? Because now maybe people are having some of the meetings in person, more diverse team members, but now it's really, how do we figure out how to make sure that they feel more included as well, because as people go back to the office. So it's really real. And it's, and so from performance factor, it's one piece, but also just how do you make them feel more included? Jess, I don't know if we have an answer for that one yet, but I just thought it was really interesting about how big organizations are, challenged with, like, how they pivoted quick during the pandemic and now what to do now.
Absolutely, that ball sort of rolling downhill. You're like, oh wait, now we have these other challenges we need to think through. So I think there's likely many answers, and I think the answers will continue to evolve and change. Vish, do you have any final rapid fire thoughts on this question before we go to our last question for the panel?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think just the biggest risk for me is if, like, leaders continue to not follow the data and not follow the research. And so one of the biggest things that all of us know about, it's literally not a surprise to anybody, is that people stay at companies for the people that they work with, for the majority, like that's the majority of people, right? And so, like, it's kind of like math, right? Like, okay, well, we're all remote, so our connections are loosening. Oh, that's why people stay at companies. Like, what do you think is going to happen, right? Like, these loose connections are going to result in a brain drain, and then the leadership's gut reaction will be like, oh crap, we need to bring everybody back to the office. But then that will end up making a lot of people really upset, and all the creatives at any organization are going to leave. Because if, organization B says, hey, we actually have people who are just like you, who who think creatively and who don't want to be back in the office, because we all know that that's not the answer. So come work with us. Sure, we'll pay you 10% less, or we'll pay you the same, but you also get to work from Hawaii for a bit, then you get to work where your family is, and then you get to do this, and you get, like, it's kind of a no-brainer what's going to happen. So I think if the longer that people, the risk, right, we're talking about risk, the longer that leaders decline to focus on making sure that we're using technology that reinforce strong connections, it's not gonna go well for them.
Got it. Yep. Got to embrace those new realities and adapt accordingly. So I'm going to ask everyone on the panel to get out your crystal ball. If you have a prediction for where things are headed, where are we going, and how can the rest of those listening today be proactive, kind of stay one step ahead? I think we've all felt sort of behind the 8 ball for a while now, but how do we get on that front foot again? Any predictions for what's next?
I always hate it. I hate the crystal ball questions. I hate financial forecasting. How do I know? Not my forte, but I will say this, that I think that the short term and the long term are different. So Vish shared that he's 35, I'm 55. And I think that in the short term, we are still going to see resistance from the people who had decades of experience doing it one way. My husband happens to work as, get this, a mainframe programmer. They are still out there for for JP Morgan Chase. And Jamie Dimon has said people are to come back to the office. Comcast is a major client of ours. Comcast is now doing a return to office. It's not 5 days a week. But the large companies out there, and particularly the large companies with massive real estate holdings, are saying, we need you back in the office. And they talk a lot about needing it for collaboration, which I think is, we've spent most of this call talking about the fact that that's just not true. You can absolutely collaborate. We're doing it right here and right now, without all being in the same place or even in the same time zone. Thanks, Vish. So in the short term, I think that we are going to see the old guard, now that it is safe for the time being, physically in terms of people's health, to come back to the office, a push for that. And I think that, as Vish just pointed out, we are also going to see a very strong resistance to that. But there's going to be a push and a pull while the old guard are still in leadership positions. And as the younger generations, the Gen Zs, the millennials, continue to take on leadership roles, we will start to see more flexibility and more awareness that the way doing things the way they've always been done, just because that's the way they've always been done, is not a good way to run a business.
Thanks so much, Leslie. Cath, crystal ball, let's hear it.
Yeah, I think it's like, when I think about our workspaces, I think it's going to be a place that we meet, we do the water cooler. It's not a place where we're going to do work so much. And, we're looking at redoing our Philadelphia office, and that's a lot of our conversation is, we don't need all these meeting rooms and these big board rooms. Instead, how do we have all these open areas where we can actually have sessions like this live? And that's what's going to draw people back into our office. It's not because I want to get a whiteboard and collaborate. It's going to be because I want to go meet people. And I think like you mentioned, Leslie, the old guard, it's been there, done that. The new guard that's coming up, they've been there, done that. Is I went to college in a place where for 3 years I didn't go to class in a physical place, but I went, maybe to the dining hall, right? So I was at home. So I think they've been there, done that is very different than ours. And to your point, Leslie, I think that's really going to change why people come into the workspace.
Vish.
Cool. So I'll wrap this up. My crystal ball tells me that, and this is from talking to leaders around the world who are kind of the leading technology companies. I just came back from Masters of Scale, which is sort of the Reid Hoffman event, and every CEO is there, right? Like Eric Schmidt was there, and the Figma CEO is there, and Bill Gates was there, and like literally all these folks who were thinking Satya Nadella was there, all the folks thinking very deeply about future of work. And kind of the thinking is all the same, right? Which is that remote and distributed is the way of the future for their workforces. And they agree that why fight it? Like drawing people into the office doesn't make any sense. It doesn't mean that we never see each other, right? So having everybody get together once a quarter, it makes a ton of sense. I do that, right? And so having a retreat or an on-site is the new off-site type mindset, where you see each other every so often, but the technology improves to such a point that you can actually get super collaborative, productive, inclusive work done, where the ROI for your employees is so much higher, right? And then ultimately that will be a better ROI for your company. I think it's just very, very important that companies keep in mind the creative brain drain that will happen if they aren't, if they don't keep up. I think it sounds harsh, but like it's a word of caution, right? So you don't want people sort of fluxing from your organization because of your policies, right? You want people coming because you've created a great culture and are doing things that resonate with the folks around the world who you want to hire. And right now the majority of the workforce is millennials and Gen Z. And so again, we just need to look at the research, look at the data, and we have the best chance of being fine.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for your insightful comments, thoughts, actions, ideas, really helpful today. We were gonna shift over to breakouts, but given the fact that we've got a pretty intimate group here, I think maybe we'll stay together, and just anyone who would like to come off mute and ask any questions, feel free. The topics that we had teed up for the breakout were really around leveling the playing field for on-site and virtual employees, sharing real life tips and tricks on how to be more inclusive in terms of building inclusive cultures, and then the metaverse, inclusion, and the future of work. So broad range, I think that pretty much addresses a lot of the things that we already talked about and that we could categorize into the topic for today's panel. But I'll just encourage anyone who's interested in asking a question, you can drop it in the chat, or you can, come on video and unmute. This is an informal, collaborative, and open dialogue where we can all be vulnerable about the realities of today, and also what some of the things are that perhaps we can prioritize to make work even better. I wonder if there's a brave person. I might even call on Danielle, because Danielle's always so brave, to maybe say hello.
Could have predicted that. Hi, longtime PACT listener.
Former PACT team member.
This was such a great conversation. I really appreciate it. I was chatting a little bit with Jess on the side. Super excited to go make a pop. No, I love that. I mean, I think, conversations about authenticity and showing up, I always feel comfortable bringing my South Philly to work. So I appreciate that it's become kind of more common and more accepted now to just be you in the workplace. And, these are my differences. This is my culture. This is my religion. This is my ethnicity, my background. But that is something I struggle with, that, conversations, Zoom, Teams, everything scheduled, everything is really kind of transactional and tactical. So I'd say, as a chatty person, that's probably one of the biggest places that I struggle. So I thank you all for responding to that question so well.
Danielle, I may ask you a question a little bit because I know you, but when I think about bringing your best self to work, and you just joined a company in the past year in a remote hybrid environment, how were you able to bring your best self to work? I
think for me, I'm a pretty outgoing person, so I don't struggle with it as much as some others would. But Accenture, not to toot Accenture's horn too much, but I think is really good about making that part of the culture from the very beginning, and kind of putting it out there as a value. And for everyone's sake, Cath and I work on the same team together. Our leadership on that team is very vocal about mental health, mental well-being, being who you are, where are you from? It is built into the conversation, but I imagine that was work that you all put in long before I got there to make that part of the culture, right? So you're doing the work. But it didn't really click for me, honestly, until I met people in person. And that's when it clicks. And that's when you're like, oh, you're taller than I thought you were, or, oh, I have known you for a year and this is the first time I can give you a hug, social distancing, but yes, I can give you a hug. And that's why I think it's so important, this kind of hybrid approach, because it makes it click.
Thank you, Danielle, for sharing. Really appreciate it.
Of course.
And letting me pick on you.
Always been picking on me for 25 years. So
probably longer. I don't know. We went to high school together, so we've known each other a really long time. Anyone else on the line want to come off mute and share a question, or just comment generally about the conversation, or an idea that you've implemented that's working in terms of building inclusive cultures? We'd love to hear that too.
I'll comment. I think this is a great conversation, and you know, we're trying to do more within. I work with Ben Franklin Technology Partners. Hi to the PACT folks that I know. So we've been just really, we're struggling with, you know, trying to bring people back and doing the hybrid and all of that. And so we're doing things more intentional, fun things, trying to do. Just this past Friday, we had a Harvest Fest where we just had, you know, we have a great building and we have a porch that looks out on this great lawn at the Navy Yard. And so, you know, we just had a soup day. It was very nice. It was a lovely event. There are still a number of people who just, as much as we offer, they don't take us up on things. You know, the tools that we're starting to use, that, you know, trying to do these in-person things, they're just not even willing to come in for social events, you know, so that's a struggle that we're having. You know, we're doing coaching tools, we're doing different apps to help learn more about being more inclusive and shifting our culture and all of these things, and they just are not even doing it. That's a struggle that we're having. So any thoughts to improve that?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one because I think we all struggle with it. You have to meet people where they are. And you have to recognize that the idea that you have for the right solution is not the right solution for everyone. Back to the topic that I raised before, if the person is succeeding in the work that you need them to do, then it may not be necessary that they be a part of the non-work activities. And I absolutely have folks like that on my team. They are all about the work, and they're very open about being all about the work. And we put a lot of emphasis on culture. We have an event going on today. We've got a fall tailgate. We are going to be announcing the winner of which leader gets a pie in the face. There is obviously an on-site component to that, but we were very intentional about the fact that we've got a lot of folks within the organization who are not here. So when we have an on-site event, we are also thinking about how can we be inclusive of the people who are not here and make them feel as though they're a part of the social goings on as well, if they choose to be. And I will give a major shout out to my manager of training development and engagement, because she has really spearheaded the effort to figure out how to do it. If you are having an on-site tailgate event, what can you do for the remote workers to ensure that they feel as though they're a part of it? And some of it is that we'll video them in, right? For the pie in the face component, that will be something that everybody can tune in to watch. I'm happy to say I'm not the winner or the loser of that particular component. But ensuring that you are allowing people to work in a way that is comfortable for them, and then acknowledging that you can't force fit square pegs into round holes. And while keeping everybody connected is the best way to ensure retention, you can't be everything to all people. So back to meeting people where they are.
It looks like we have one hand raised. Feel free to come off mute. Yes, thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name's Hania from Accenture as well, and I serve on the Talent Connect Advisory Board. I just wanted to add, you also have to include your people in the planning of the events, right? So when I think about some of the advice that Cath gave and how large our offices are and how we be more inclusive, some of the approaches that we take is to just ask our people, what are the events that you want to see? And then allow them to take the lead on planning it, because a lot of us are only one person sometimes trying to plan these events for our people. but we can't see everything. And so I know it's been really helpful, particularly in the Philadelphia office, when people come to myself or our office managing director or Cath and say, hey, it would be a great idea to do X, Y, and Z. And we're like, okay, what can we do to support you planning it? And then we are able to execute like fun events that our people actually want to see, whether it's an open mic, whether it's the Hot Ones Challenge, whether it's a Nintendo game day in the office, just stuff that our people actually feel like they're a part of the planning versus those events being planned for them and they have no say so.
That's great. Thank you.
Love that
I'll
suggestion.
jump in and want to say, to Ania's point, one of the places that I think a lot of companies, Accenture included, do a really good job is finding ways to gather people around like demographics, around things like pride, around things like, working mothers and other groups. One of the things that I'd like to see more of, and I think, what Hini is talking about with some of the stuff that we do in the local office, is around interests, around, I really love to travel. I really love food. It's not as, it's not the place to start when you're thinking about how do you gather employees that have similarities and like-mindedness. But I think it's a nice evolution because some people don't necessarily say like, I check this very obvious box for this very obvious employee group, but I would love to connect with people that really like classical music or, and that's a little bit harder to kind of find. But when you kind of allow people to create, their own like smaller events and little groups and little outings, if you can facilitate that more as a workplace, I think that would go a long way.
One of the other things that we've been talking about, is how do we create FOMO in our offices too? So how do we create like, oh, I just missed out on that, right? So it's not always this big planful thing. So I know I was in the Philadelphia office a couple of weeks ago and a couple of analysts in there. I'm like, hey, who wants an impromptu pizza party? And they were all like, what? I'm like, I'll order pizza. Let's just do pizza. And then we like made sure some of it went into Yammer. So, and it's not so much that we're trying to show people like, be exclusive, right? But it's like, here's a reason to come in. You never know what you're going to see and find when you get here. We don't want to be, again, exclusive and say, oh, sorry, you can't get here, but how do we also create those FOMO events that may happen remotely as well? So what we're trying to figure out, like, do we go with this FOMO or is it going to feel more exclusive? But there's definitely some opportunities to create that, especially I think with our younger analysts and consultants and our new team members who are like, wait, I don't know, should I go in the office? It's like, you never know what you're going to find. So give it a check out.
And I think you also can't discredit, not that everything leads to, doing well as a business and making money, but you can't discount how external people, when they observe that your people want to be there and they feel included and they're connected, that is such a huge selling point for an organization. Because like I've had clients that have had FOMO. I had a client come up to me and say, I came to this event and then I saw you had a happy hour after this event that I went to, and I can't believe I made other plans and I'm so sorry. Please let me know when you'll do that again. And they feel the workplace culture and, they want to be a part of it too. It's such a great selling point for us to actually make connections with people we want to do business with, not just our employees.
I would say, hi, just one thing, Amy Cicero with Accenture. Also, one of the things I think that we, and Cath, I think you do a great job with this too, is that, talking about with some of the younger employees that are analysts, consultants, I think there is this, this fear that if they like go to the office and they're going to like socialize and they'll be behind on their work, they'll look as if like, oh, like, well, I have all these meetings I have to go to. I don't really have time to like do this stuff. And so it's almost like making it okay for people to take that time to socialize. I think, we're in this grind culture sort of all the time and everybody's like, oh, like I have to bill hours. I have to do X, Y, Z. I have the to-do list that's 3 pages long. I don't have time to do this. And so I think it's like, we as leaders have to make a really huge effort to make sure that we're like, hey, you know what? Like we all need to take some time just to kind of like, just connect with each other and just like do that because that's so much part of the job. I think for me, somebody who works with, I'm part of the Philadelphia office, but I work with people all over the country and all over the globe. So it is sometimes difficult for me to go into the office because I don't want to sit in an office, with the door shut for 6 hours and just be on Zoom calls all the time, because it really defeats the purpose. So I try and go into the office on days that I don't have like wall-to-wall meetings, so that I can just, go out and just chat with somebody and talk to this person, whatever. And I don't feel so guilty about it, because I'm not like, oh God, I have to go. And so I think it's just us as leaders making sure that we create those spaces for people to feel comfortable to do those type of things.
Thanks, Amy, and everyone else who commented. I think a lot of really good ideas, great points, and suggestions for how to engage, especially in the hybrid environment. I think if you're all in the office, that's kind of one way. If you're fully remote, that's another. But the hybrid requires this context switching for, okay, what am I going to do when I'm in? What am I going to do when I'm out? And it also requires a level of planning. So helping equip people with, okay, how are you going to book your calendar in a way that when you do go in the office, you have space to walk around and have those spontaneous water cooler moments. And then when you're working remotely, you might be in more of your back-to-back meeting cadence that we all love so much. So I think that like intentionality, that preparation and planning is something we have to all probably build a bit of a muscle for, because it's new in terms of how we've operated. One other call out I want to just share is that I think there is a level of social stamina that people are still building back to. And so in trying to create, I heard a great idea from a woman named Nellie Hayat that like anytime you want people in the office, make sure there's an event, something. And it could be as simple as a meet and greet with a senior leader, but something that someone will go home that day and tell their family about, or tell their friends or their roommates about. So having something that's going to happen in that office that's going to create that FOMO, Cath, you were talking about. But I would add on to that and say, try to layer events. Maybe the first part is the meet and greet with the leader. And then afterwards, there is a happy hour. So you can cut out if you don't have the social stamina to go to the happy hour, or you can stay. And maybe eventually you'll feel more comfortable staying longer. So think about stacking events for the different styles that are in the room and the different personalities. And even just like life stages that people are at. So you have an element of an event that maybe speaks to the most people. And then the next piece of it could be, and normalizing that people can leave, just go if you don't want to stay for this next phase of the activity. So a couple other suggestions there. Heidi, thanks for your chat. I think that's probably our signal to begin the wrap up portion. I want to thank everyone for your engagement. Thank you to the panelists for being so brilliant and insightful. Just such a great conversation overall. And thank you to PACT and all of the sponsors for making this happen, for the organization, Heidi certainly, and Dean for making sure we could have this discussion here today.